Good afternoon, Minnesota Twins fans. My name is Seth Stowes of Twins Daily, twinsdaily.com, back with a new episode of Twins Spotlight. Now, we haven't had an episode since mid-December, obviously giving people the holidays off and things like that, but we're back. Hopefully, we'll have anywhere from 2 to 3 shows every week, right up until spring training or even the regular season, and we'll see from there. So be sure to keep checking back on Twins Daily Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, which is where you can watch this. Please feel free to participate in this show with our guests. If you got questions or comments or want to leave some well wishes, please do so. I will share those on the screen and ask those if they come in. So feel free to do that. So without further ado, this is episode 50 of Twin Spotlight. We did 35 shows last off season. We've done 15 so far this off season. So be sure to go to the videos page on Twins Daily and check out those. But I'm really excited for our guest here tonight. Someone new to the organization, having just entered the organization real recently, and that is right-handed pitcher Drew Strotman. Um, get to know him a little bit. He grew up in California. He went to St. Mary's College and was drafted, I believe, in the fourth round by the Tampa Bay Rays. And of course, Twins fans, you know that he was one of two pitchers that the Twins received in exchange for Nelson Cruz. Obviously, Nelson Cruz, a big fan favorite among Twins fans, and did amazing things. But I think we can all agree the Twins did quite well in their return for Nelson Cruz. So without further ado, I will bring in the star of today's episode, and that is Drew Strotman. Drew, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. I see you already got the Twins garb. Did they just, as soon as they acquired you, just give you a whole bunch of stuff with their logos and emblems on it?
Well, yeah, that was part of the break-in period. My first time being traded in my career, so I showed up with a bag full of accumulated stuff from my time with the Rays and their many affiliates, and they of course said put all that stuff away. We got a box coming of stuff so you can wear the right
Absolutely.
team now.
Right, right. Good idea. Well, let's start at the beginning. Let's go back. You grew up in California. Who were your, I guess, favorite teams? Maybe some of the players. You're pitching now. Did you always pitch, and maybe there was a favorite pitcher that you admired?
Watched a lot of both the Giants and A's, being from the San Francisco Bay Area. Growing up, I'm kind of in the South Bay, so it was kind of like, up the west coast side of San Francisco to watch the Giants, or up the east side of the Bay to go watch the A's. We actually probably went to more A's games because I think my family was more into the A's scene. But as a kid, going to, at the time, I think it was Pac Bell, and then it switched to AT&T for the longest time. It was always so much fun because that stadium being on the bay with McCovey Cove, and then obviously the giant mid out in left field, and the giant Coke bottle that is actually has slides for the kids, was always just so much fun. And then obviously right when I was kind of in high school, the Giants had the 3 World Series, so that was just the baseball fandom in the area was kind of going wild, or as crazy as it's ever been. People that had never watched baseball were into it as kind of a result of the Giants' success. So
Absolutely. So as you're in the little league ages, I mean, baseball's got to be big. Were you on travel teams, or did you get started real early? What are some of your earliest memories of you actually playing?
well, I mean, I started t-ball at age 5. Just like kind of the sooner you could get into it, like I was immediately in it. It was always my first love in terms of sports. And um, my dad played tennis, and then I think like semi-professional racquetball, and then my uncle had played a little bit of baseball and football in high school, and maybe even junior college. But we didn't ever have like any standard athletes in the family, so it's not like I was following um, this beaten path, so to say. I just loved baseball, and I remember so many nights staying up late watching Giants games or A's games with my dad and asking a million questions. And that's kind of like where the love for the game grew. And I felt like, for a younger kid of everybody, I had a really good knowledge as a result of. I credit to that. He says that really it's because MLB The Show, like you play that, you learn so much about like even the little nuances because something will happen as a kid. You'll be like, what was that rule? And you kind of you have to figure it out. First time that there's a infield fly, you learn that on MLB The Show. That's something that kind of comes with it. But yeah, it was always my number one. I shouldn't say I played. I was on the high school JV basketball team. I watched very closely from the sidelines. But I played a couple other sports, but it was never quite successful at it. And probably also a result that I just, never wanted to play around in those sports as much as I do with baseball. I always wanted to be in the backyard playing wiffle ball, whatever it was. And, it's easy to practice when you love it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of like when I went to college to play and I basically became a really good scorebook keeper. You do that by not getting in the game very often. So, so that's why I do this. But anyway, tell us a little bit about your high school career. You mentioned obviously you're pitching now, and that's what kind of has led you to this career. When you weren't pitching, was there another position? And here's the big question for pitchers: could you hit?
See, I never thought I could really, hit at an elite level. I actually, I've had people love to, bring this up to other people is that I played 2 years of junior varsity baseball in high school too. So, I wasn't a 4-year varsity guy. I had a couple teammates that played varsity as sophomore. So I don't really ever feel like I was the best player on many of my teams growing up, even for baseball. It was just like, something I love to do, and after spending a second year on the JV team for baseball as well, I worked pretty hard in the classroom, so I almost started to set my sights on like, okay, where do I want to go to college academically, because this baseball thing's probably not going to work out. And at the time, I was playing mostly third base, first base, and catching, but I was also starting to lengthen out as I started to grow because I was probably mid to small size, and then started to get taller and the time lankier. I didn't have a whole lot of muscle on me in high school, but then so at the very end of my sophomore year, long story short, I got on the mound and I tried pitching out, and it started to go pretty well. I pitched our last game of the season, and it went well. I really didn't know how it was going to turn out pitching. I just knew like our team needed somebody to pitch that last game. And I guess the umpire at the time knew our varsity coach and like called him up after the game and was like, "You're going to like this kid next year to pitch for you." And I didn't know. So pretty soon I transitioned into travel ball, and I started to move away, especially away from catching. But instead of playing infield, I started to play more outfield, and we started to kind of work on more pitching stuff. And I still remember the day I was at a travel ball practice, and they would kind of bring in coaches, usually minor league guys that were in the off season for the winter and could come out for a practice and like do some lessons pretty much. And we were headed down the sideline, and the pitching coach is like, "Hey, high velocity right-hander," is what he told the guy that was working with me. And I like triple take that. And I was like, "What do you mean high velocity?" Because I was never, I didn't throw the hardest. And I remember watching Barry Zito when he was with the Giants. So obviously the back end of his career, when he was really not throwing hard, he was a, low to mid 80s guy, really. And I was going, "Dad, you know what? He throws so like slow relative for the major leagues, and I'm never going to throw as hard as he does. Like that's what's crazy about it." And then my dad was like, "No, like, you'll throw that hard." And like, I didn't believe at the time, but I guess he was right. And like, the rest is history. I've definitely thrown harder than he was at the time, but obviously he was a whole different type of pitcher.
Sure.
Phenomenal career, and I'm still trying to chase that big old curveball that he throws. That's something that just feels near impossible to master, but I know it's out there.
Oh man, that was such a good pitch, and obviously probably did more benefit for him when he was still in Oakland than when he went over to San Francisco. But again, we're joined here by Drew Strotman, Twins pitching prospect, came over in the Nelson Cruz trade, and hopefully someday we'll call it the Drew Strotman trade. Again, welcoming any questions if you've got them. We'll take here about a half an hour, hopefully, with Drew as he takes some time out of his day to get to know us a little bit, or so we get to know him. But let's talk now. St. Mary's is a Division I school, I believe. But it's not, it's maybe not talked about as much, but it's a program that has had a lot of guys get drafted, had a few guys in the big leagues. So it's a legit, strong program. So to go from maybe I'm a pitcher, maybe not, like you were saying, to getting an opportunity at St. Mary's, how did that happen? Were you playing summers, or did you have some, I don't know, people kind of reach out to you? What was the recruiting process for you?
I think they were one of the first schools to reach out. I remember the assistant coach at the time, Mark Viramontes, came out and saw me playing in a winter. I think it was a winter league at the time tournament. But yeah, they were one of the first people to like kind of inquire about my pitching abilities, and I was never, I was recruited and they said like, oh, maybe you can hit, but I mean that was never really a thing. And my dad always said like, oh, maybe you can hit in college, you led your high school team in average. But I said, Dad, if I'm the college pitchers, I can't hit off me. I can hit off some of these other guys in our high school division, but um, and I wasn't a big scholarship guy going into college, so I figured I was going to step into the bottom of the totem pole, especially the bottom of the talent pool, and really have to kind of work hard to step up. Um, and and I kind of got, and this has happened almost, every stage that I've kind of gone up in my career is like I've expected the talent pool to be a lot higher than it ends up being. Like it's almost a shock to me that I can fit in. Of course, like I'm at this point, I feel close to reaching a level in my baseball career that was nothing but a childhood dream growing up. So like it's just it's been humbling and amazing to be able to like step into a room and look across the room and see guys that and like Josh Donaldson, that's somebody that's, especially having grown up in the Bay Area, that's somebody that was like a superstar and still is. I mean, that's just like amazing. And you said getting traded for a name like Nelson Cruz, it's just like it's an amazing honor. And I mean, it's definitely extremely humbling, and like the childhood, version of Drew is just like almost kicking me every day. Like, you kidding me? Like, there's no way that's you. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I got into St. Mary's. Was teammates for a couple seasons with both Corbin Burns, who just won the Cy Young,
He's
and
pretty
then
good.
Tony Gonsolin, who's been
Dodgers.
one of the main 10 pitchers for the Dodgers the last few seasons. And I think he's just primed to get some more innings and really break out one of these. Like 2022 is probably going to be a big year for him. And then we have another handful of minor league pitchers. So I mean, yeah, St. Mary's. I've told a lot of people, the only reason you really know it is if you watch a lot of college basketball, and they're the team that goes up against Gonzaga every year.
Yeah.
Conference tournament. Like everybody's like, oh yeah, that's the team, and
Yep.
but quietly we've just been producing, pitching, and I mean, I think there's, hopefully myself included, a lot of talent kind of coming up the pipeline still. And I mean, I think they had a first or second rounder last year come out of there. Kyle Busch, left-handed pitcher. So, it's quietly a little pitching mecca there.
Well, my next question was going to be just kind of looking at your numbers at St. Mary's. You were primarily a reliever, and I was going to ask, why, or is that kind of just the process? And then you mentioned Burns and Gonsolin, and now I understand why maybe bullpen made some sense. But the question there is, you did get more innings, you did get more opportunities, higher leverage, all of that. And then your junior year, you did make 7 starts. So what was like, I don't want to say, well, maybe the physical and the mental transition for you over the course of those 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, in college it was. I will say, and this is how very much many college seasons go. It's you ride the hot hand because you only have so many games. You have 4 on the weekends to preseason, and you have 3 in conference. So, and I didn't really throw the hardest at the time. I didn't have a velocity jump until my junior season when we had an assistant coach come in that kind of like really began to teach me about how to use my body, because, I find that I have a different way of thinking than a lot of other guys. It's rather untraditional, and I've been able to kind of lean into the analytics side of the game right now, and that's where the Rays do a lot with that. I felt like they were a great fit, and we worked very well, and I learned so much my time there. And then also with the Twins, like very much the same. And immediately when I stepped foot into a Twins locker room and started to talk to some of the team personnel, we were very much on the same page, like analytics wise, like what are we sort of chasing for. It was very seamless transition for me to sit down in those meetings and feel like I had a pretty good understanding of what they were talking to me in terms of metrics and whatnot. So I mean, and to track back in college, I don't feel like I really had a good understanding of who I was as a pitcher. I was only a couple years into it and had a very minimal knowledge. But now I look back at video from that time, and I was just like, what was I doing? How did I even get that far?
Yeah.
But I mean, throughout my college career, I kind of leaned on a big kind of like sweeping slider was my pitch. And as a freshman, we had hitters that now played a few years in minor league baseball, and one of them is now a hitting coach with the Orioles, Anthony Villa. I remember him specifically telling me, like, slider's a big league pitch. Like, all right, so it was like that was always something that I leaned on, and especially out of the bullpen there, I could just come in and just slider, 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 slider. So once I kind of got that velocity jump my junior season, and I was, had a good fastball with this slider, and then I started to have, 3 pitches, mix in a curveball. Like I had 3 to 4 pitches, which is really kind of what you look for out of a starter, as opposed to coming here with a good breaking ball and half a fastball. And in college, that's plenty that'll do it for a reliever. So I think that's kind of, I would say, the reasoning as to why I fit better into a reliever role in college than I do now. Because now I have 4 to 5 pitches that are I consider above average, according to the metrics. So
Yeah.
I just know that, like, going into next season, I'll 100% be the first one to admit I need to attack the strike zone more and like get ahead of guys and then use my pitches. I mean, I didn't do a great job of that, especially after I got traded last year. I mean, it was the most frustrating half of baseball season I've ever had. It was just,
Well, you had a little bit going on, I'm sure.
yeah, but that's no excuse when you're on the field.
No, I get that, but it is the reality that your guys aren't robots, and change and does affect a lot of things. I want to go back to the draft, though. Kind of what you've talked about is you've worked as a reliever. I'm always amazed by area scouts and what they're able to do. So if you're at a good college, a Division I school with some other guys that they're watching, and you're working out of the bullpen, for them to be able to say, okay, this guy's a guy that we need. But not only that, but you were drafted in the 4th round. I mean, that's not just a guy you kind of see once or twice. So, your name was out there. So draft day, I know we're going back a little ways, but what was that day like for you? It would have been day 2.
Yeah.
Was that kind of the range you were hearing you may or may not go?
It was frankly a huge whirlwind, and I was kind of what you'd consider at the time a helium prospect in terms of
Sure.
like I said, I started really throwing that much harder a couple months before the draft. I went from scraping low 90s to running up to mid to high 90s, and so that from a scouting perspective, I think just kind of raised the ceiling, because what I had always heard was that I move smooth, like this is a projectable delivery, but it's just a question of kind of like, can he figure out the velocity at some point, or he's got a smooth arm action, but is it really going to come on? So I know, like, a lot of our area scouts didn't really have like a great report written up on me throughout the season, because I mean, I'll be frank, I wasn't impressive at the time. I was somebody they'd have notes on, but maybe not turn a full report. So going into the draft, the months leading up, when I started throwing harder, I was getting starts and pitching well, and down the stretch, I was balancing schoolwork, but then I'd run from schoolwork to go have a meeting at the local Starbucks with the area scouts so they could get to know me a little bit. I think I had maybe 24 files on my computers of the surveys they had me fill out for like health and kind of getting to know you as a player, just so they have
questionnaires you have to fill out.
All the questionnaires. So I had half of my computer was these icons of like questionnaire from this team, questionnaire from this team. So it was just like a whirlwind of a season towards the draft, coming up to the draft, where I just kind of having that helium projection where it's not like I stepped in. We had I think a first team All-American, Zach Kirtley, my grade in St. Mary's. That was a first team, preseason All-American. So scouts were coming out to see him. They weren't coming out to see me. So it was kind of like I didn't know what to expect. And I don't know if that, led to me having higher expectations or lower expectations, but obviously a huge honor to sit there. But I mean, that just makes draft day even harder. You're sitting there and, you're not sure what to believe. So that's.
Who were you with? Who are some of the people? Were you around people, or did you treat it like a normal day?
I treat it like a normal day. I'm not like a big gathering kind of person. Like I don't like to, everybody come with me. So I was just with my family, my mom, my dad, my sister, and the fact that we really didn't know like for certainty kind of what the situation would be. Like when guys know they're going to be one of the first 10 picks, like pretty safe on day one, they can gather a party and, wait for that call. But I didn't know if it was going to be day one, day two. My agent was saying like, if we don't get a number that you want, maybe we try to push for day three and get a team to, that didn't sign guys at slot, like have some money left over, try and take you. So maybe we have to wait for day three.
The strategy around the draft is it's tough. And so, I definitely get that. So I want to kind of jump in again. We're talking to Drew Strotman, one of the Twins' new pitching prospects. He came over in a trade from Tampa, and let's talk about the trade a little bit. You're playing in Durham. You're pitching great in Durham. How did you hear the news? Were you hearing rumblings? I mean, I know the Rays have been kind of tied to Cruz for a few years, much less last year. As a player, how hard is it not to think about the trade deadline? And do you hear names? Do you hear rumblings?
Well, I mean, kind of, the good and bad thing about being a player and being around all this stuff is that one of our favorite pastimes in the clubhouse is to what we call play GM. So we'll sit there and, theorize, what could happen, especially heading into trade deadline season. Maybe this is not something that happens at a low A level, but being in AAA, that there's a lot of pieces here of either the team trying to make room for certain guys to get up to the big leagues, or guys are, maybe good pieces that could be included. So it's not like going into the trade deadline season, nobody had ever talked about me included being a trade. Of course, this is nothing from team personnel. Nobody would kind of, I guess,
we're looking to trade you.
Hey, watch out. We're going to trade you, and the trade deadline pass, and you're like, oh, I had my bags packed. I was ready to get out of here. But I remember when I was told it was, we had a normal, I think, 7:00 game. I wasn't pitching that day, so I was in uniform but not wearing cleats as a starting pitcher. You're not going to pitch that day. You're kind of just a cheerleader for the day. So I was probably down towards the end of the dugout on the rail talking to some people, and the manager, Brady Williams, comes down the dugout as I think we're only in the top of the first inning. I don't even think we're in the bottom of the first yet. So we're on defense. He taps me on the butt and was like, hey, you've been traded. And I didn't know. I certainly wasn't expecting that. So I almost had like an out-of-body moment at the time. And I think I said, like, are you kidding? Knowing very well it's something he wouldn't be joking about. It's not something manager to come over there and play a prank on a guy and just, hey, you got traded.
Yeah, that's
So
mean.
then he's like, yeah, man, you and Joe for Nelson Cruz to the Twins. And I was like, all right. I had a group of people around me that I was like, it's been a pleasure, guys. Top of the first inning, so there's a lot of ball game to happen. So I immediately went down to the clubhouse and slowly started, taking phone calls, packing bags, because pretty soon, like they're like, team personnel will be reaching out to you shortly. I didn't know how soon I was going to be out of there. I didn't know if I had a flight that night to get to St. Paul or whatever. So it was just the whole thing. Looking back, feels like an out of body experience. I can almost see myself sitting there. I was down in the clubhouse and people were progressively coming in. One of my good buddies on the team, Phoenix Sanders, his kind of side of the story is also funny because he was down in the bullpen. And so our starter throws well in the first inning, of course, like not in any trouble to get pulled from the game. And they call down to the bullpen, Sanders to the dugout. Because the reason being because they wanted him to come say something to me or come, at least acknowledge that I just got traded.
Yeah.
And he says his whole trip down from the bullpen to the dugout, he's going, I just got traded. He's thinking he's the one that got traded because he has no idea. It's that season now where anybody can get moved anywhere. And so then he got down there and said, Strotman just got traded. He's down at the clubhouse. And then he tried to tell me, come on up to the dugout and at least hang out. You don't have to do this packing right now. And I was like, dude, I don't play for this team anymore. Do you realize that?
Yeah.
I'm wearing the jersey still. I'm not on this team anymore. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
So it definitely was quite bizarre. And frankly, something you don't have a good grasp on what it's like until you go through it, sort of thing. And I mean,
well, and the other side of it is how are you even supposed to feel? One team is letting you go while you're in AAA, but the other side says, like you said, I got traded for Nelson Cruz, who's really good and is going to help Tampa. And Minnesota sees something in me that they like too. So it's really got to be just kind of a million, your mind moving 100%. A million miles a minute.
100%. And I mean, I knew stepping into Minnesota it's not like I'm oblivious to the baseball world. They're competitive in the playoffs. I'm like, yeah, they're having a down year, but that doesn't take away from how good of a team it is. And I mean, there's no question in my mind, they're going to return to contingency with easily in the next couple of years. And I hope to be a part of that. So, I mean, and Twins fans saw, how great of a pitcher Joe Ryan is. I mean, you saw down the stretch. So hopefully, I can make an impact, and with him, it becomes worthwhile. So, I mean, that I knew I was stepping into a land of opportunity with a team that has a very solid base. It wasn't like I was stepping into a complete rebuild of an organization, or I wasn't, a player dump. I didn't feel so. It was just kind of it's clearly a good situation, and that kind of also added to the frustration of my season. Was I felt like there was all this opportunity. I was going to be given this opportunity, and I just wasn't taking advantage of it after I got traded. And I felt as though I might not have been, but I felt like I was the most frustrated player in that clubhouse, just because once I got to St. Paul, because not only did I feel others' expectations but I had expectations of myself once I got there, and I wasn't meeting them. So it's just putting in a lot of work this off season and kind of reset, go to next year and play the game that I love.
Hey, Drew, do you have time? We're at about 25, 30 minutes here. Are you okay for another 10, 15?
Yeah,
okay.
I got to work out, and then I'll give some lessons, but.
Okay. All right, because I wanted to ask another kind of question. I mean, everyone talks about the Rays pitching and their pipeline, and even having traded, you and Joe Ryan, they went into the playoffs and pitched Shane Baz and Shane McClanahan in games 1 and games 2. They have Luis Patino, who they got in the Blake Snell trade. Brendan McKay, I know, has been hurt. And they just have this pipeline that's incredible. I'd be curious your thoughts on what makes them successful. And 2, you mentioned it a little bit earlier with the analytics, the technologies that the Twins now have. They didn't until about 4 or 5 years ago, but now I feel like they're right there. How similar are the organizations, do you think?
Well, and that was part of, getting traded and experiencing a different organization for the first time in my career. Luckily for me, the Twins and the Rays have a lot of overlap and overlap of personnel. There's people that came from the Rays to the Twins, Rocco included. So I mean,
Josh Kalk.
yeah. I spent a lot of time talking to Josh, and I mean, so I would say when stepping into a new organization, it's all about kind of like the culture is kind of the biggest thing, and I mean how that applies to the way coaches and players interact with each other, how they interact with the data. Do they allow data to drive everything they do, or is there kind of a mix between like the science and the art of baseball? Or there's just kind of like a little nuances in the way that the game is handled within the organization, and the overall perspectives. And again, luckily for me, they were very similar. The Rays to the Twins, I've heard from other guys in other organizations, that it's nothing like. And the number one way you learn that is, you start to talk about, let's say, TrackMan data, and which is some of the ball flight technology that we use for analysis. And some guys from other organizations just have zero grasp on like what some of that stuff means, because the organization doesn't use it, and thus they don't teach the players kind of the efficacy and what they're shooting for, and kind of the bigger picture surrounding the analytics side. So, like I said, because of what I had learned with the Rays and just by being around it, I felt as though I could step into the organization and have a good idea of what we were talking about. Because sometimes guys come from organizations that have yet to adapt, or frankly just won't adapt the analytics because they believe more in, I guess you could say, the art side of the game. And it may be harder for them to understand like what some of these terms mean, or how to go about it. I mean, it was very interesting. I think you're muted. Sorry.
Every time. No, what I was gonna say, Drew, was I should have asked this earlier. What was your degree or area of study in college? I mean, was there some sort of analytic or math or scientific spin, or was this all new to you?
Well, obviously, I got drafted after my junior year, so I hadn't finished the time, but I was studying accounting.
Okay.
So very much, big data. Let's organize the data, see what it tells us, figure out the patterns, and try to create something more efficient through it. So, I mean, that's where kind of, for me, the analytics side fits and makes sense. Now, I don't have like all the expertise, and I've never, really, dove into these data systems to where I can go in there and code something myself. But I have a loose enough understanding of it to believe in the system for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing, and I've had several pitchers on when I do these shows, ask them about technology, and it sounds like, I mean, clearly the Twins want a pipeline like Cleveland's, like Tampa's, of pitchers, and it seems their draft strategy has been a lot of spin. It's been a lot of college guys, but the pitchers have also told me that they have all the technology available. It's just how do you spell it out, and then how does each individual take it in. Some might want to see this, some might want to, but ultimately it's an individual plan. It's your career, so it feels like there's a really good communication, and that's what I'm kind of curious too. When you came over to the organization, I think you took maybe, it was probably a week or even 10 days before you actually made a start. I assume that's, time getting to know some people, meeting the pitching coaches, maybe even having some of those discussions before you even have to worry about throwing on the mound. Now, maybe that delay is something that threw you off, numerically, that you've mentioned a couple times, but there does seem to be a value in having those conversations. Did you have those, or did you do a few bullpens and try a few things?
Yeah, and I mean, I've described it to several people as there was almost a bit of like growing pains when I first got over, because of all these, new approaches. I had kind of been under one umbrella with the Rays. I had really learned to approach the game in my way within the game, just one way. So when I got over, I definitely wanted to acknowledge, the way the Twins do stuff and give their system a shot because, this is where I'll be. There's no way in which, it's been great, but like, let's say it wasn't great. I can't say, oh, I'm unhappy and I get to go back to the race. That's not how it works, obviously. So I knew that I was going to, this is my new home and I needed to, get to know the ins and outs of how we do things here. So I may have, when I first got traded, I feel looking back, I may have almost overtaken on the challenge of, adapting to a new way. Because initially they said, we'll give you a couple weeks to just do your thing before we really get into anything. And I was almost just like, no, bring it on. Come on. Like, let's get into the nitty gritty right now. And I mean, I may have bitten off more than I could chew at the time. That was 100% like on me, just because I was, wanting to dive into the trenches. So I mean, that's another challenge that you got to.
Well, you mentioned expectations that you have on yourself, or even if most of that's self-inflicted.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back a little bit more basic. Tell us what you throw. I mean, obviously, there were reports in St. Paul that you were sitting, say, 96, 97, touching 98 and even 99 at times. But along with the fastball, what are your pitches?
So last season, I'll say I primarily pitched off of fastball slider, so a four-seam fastball and just a little dot-like slider is what we call it. That's not one that sweeps big time. It's mainly just like what I would call a dip slider. Similar to what you see from like Tyler Duffy, sort of something that has a little dive at the end that not a big hump that you see out of a curveball. But then I do throw a curveball that was never top line pitch. My changeup really came on this last season. I was really happy with how it was playing, and I've continued to tweak it a little bit this offseason to try and increase the consistency of it, because it was the way I was throwing it was a little funky and hard to repeat, but it was effective when it was good. But it was a question of that's the biggest question: is it going to be good that day? Am I going to be throwing it right? So I've been adapting it to try and make it more consistent, something I can really start to lean on more. Because I think we're gonna try to really do more of a true mix this next year, and because that I have 4 good pitchers, let's use them, sort of thing.
Absolutely.
I'm working on a 5th one. It's gonna be a question. It's gonna be something that once I get back into spring, and I'll get down with the team and I'll throw it in front of the analytics systems, and we'll talk about is this a real option? Should I consider this, or is it a scrap? Am I wasting my time? Am I just gonna overflow the system by trying to add this now too? So that's the feedback that I do value, and I do trust coaches and personnel to be honest with me. And
I think that two-way communication is so important. It can't just be one direction. It has to be, feedback and such. You mentioned earlier Joe Ryan, obviously the Twins I think 2 starts in St. Paul, and I don't know, 5, 6 starts with the Twins. Looked pretty good. You've been teammates with him for a while. What we see was a really good short, small sample size, or is that what Joe Ryan can be?
No, he's pretty special. And I mean, so when we were both in Durham and he was getting ready to go off to the Olympics with Shane Baz in Japan, we had kind of, looked at the dates and said, you're going to be in Japan during the trade deadline. Like, sort of, you might be traded while you're across the globe. Little did we know that he and I would be traded together. Of course, he wasn't there. He was still, competing in the Olympics by the time I got to St. Paul. So I was pitching there, getting to know the guys. And some of them were asking me, like, hey, what do you got on this other guy that's coming over? And I was like, you just wait. Like, he's nasty. He's just gonna punch guys with fastballs. You're not gonna really understand how, probably, and it's gonna be impressive. I mean, of course, he exceeded the
Yeah.
tale I told when he showed up and like punched out the first 12 guys, and it was just he was unbelievable. But to me, it wasn't a huge surprise. It was almost like he's pitching, guys looking down at me in the dugout, and I'm just going, "Yep, told you." Like,
Told you.
this is Joe.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Ryan experience. Like,
Yeah.
the Ryan Express round 2. Get all aboard.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, he and both Simeon Wood Richardson, who came to the Twins in a trade for Barrios, were both in the Olympics as well. All right, last few minutes here with Drew Strotman of the Twins. Ended the season with the Saints, and hopefully we've got some baseball and spring training starting soon. You're on the 40-man roster. The Rays added you. Not this offseason, or last offseason, after the 2020 shortened season, I believe. You did have Tommy John surgery. Do you feel your arm is back? I mean, I know it's been like 2.5 years or so. How long did it take until you felt you were kind of at 100%?
I felt good going into last season, and
Okay.
and I think so. Throughout my career, I came out of college, off of college season, pitched about 50 innings in 2017. In 2018, I pitched about 50 innings before I got hurt. And got the surgery, came back at the end of 2019 and pitched about 50 innings. So I'd really thrown about 50 innings a year. So this season I was feeling good, and after injury, sometimes the hardest part is definitely like the mental side of like of relocking in that like I'm healthy. There's no questions. This ache or pain that I'm feeling in my arm is a normal ache or pain. I'm not gonna,
Right.
It's not something that I need to see a doctor about. And some guys never get over that hump. Some guys, are pretty stubborn, and that hump never exists. And they ever ache or pain, they're like, I'm good. But so I think, I started to get up to the 70, 80 range this year. And, per my past experience, I didn't know if, do I keep the gas on and like really just push through the end, or do I try and find ways to, ease back? And of course, October is the most important time of year. So you don't want to, you want to be at your best in October.
Right.
And I felt like in the past, I was always best at the end of the college season. And then after I had the college season and then played short season after I got drafted, I was great then. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm good at the end of the year. But I know that was another part that like kind of added on to the frustration of last season, was like in my struggles, I knew like part of the question was like, is your arm okay? And I'm like, yeah, my arm is fine. I'm not pitching like I should. I know, like, that was one of the questions that was almost like boils your blood to like hear, like, are you okay? And it's like, yeah, I just need to do better.
And people are just concerned. They want to make sure you're
Of
all right.
course.
They mean
Of
well.
course.
You also, after that season, that 2019 season, had a chance to get some extra innings in the Arizona Fall League. You were teammates on that team with Royce Lewis, who of course had the MVP season, and you guys had a great year with I want to say Salt River.
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like for you? And secondly, besides say that group of guys, and I can't remember who else was on it besides Royce, but were there others in the organization that you either knew from college or growing up, or I mean, I know the Twins and Rays do a lot in spring training too, so I'm sure there's some knowledge there, but are there other guys you were close with?
A lot of faces you see across the field in spring training, not guys you know personally, but guys you know who they are. So I mean, all the younger Twins guys that you guys have gotten to know the last couple of years are guys that I have played against in spring training the last couple on backfields down in Florida, and the heat and humidity of that time of year.
Oh, yeah.
In the fall league, I played with Ben Wortvet, who was a catcher in St. Paul in the big leagues back and forth. But I mean, a friendly face that kind of was there when I stepped in the clubhouse. And then Giovanni Moran was there.
Oh, yeah.
And, he was impressive to where I knew exactly he was just going to come and dominate guys with the changeup. And I mean, there was a couple other guys. Dakota Chalmers was there. And then I think
I could have looked and
Luke
been more
Raley, who
prepared.
ended up playing for the Dodgers a little bit last
Oh,
year,
right.
was there
Yeah.
For the Twins time. So yeah, there was a good group of guys and a couple that I played with this last season in the fall league. Obviously Royce, who was unbelievable in the fall league. I'll tell a quick Royce story because they tried him out in the outfield for the first time. So we know he's a good infielder.
Right.
Stick him out in center field for the first time. He's never really played center field. Goes back, absolutely runs into the wall and robs a home run on the field, and you're just like, this guy's never played center field before. Like being with the Rays, you got to appreciate like Kevin Kiermaier out there, a guy that just
Right.
locked down defensively. Like that's something he would do. And I was like, wow. And then he came up the next half inning and hit a ball like, I don't know if you've seen Salt River, but like almost to the top of the mounds out there on the left, which is, something impressive. And we were looking around like, okay, so this guy's a shortstop playing center field that just made a Gold Glove quality play out there, and then came up probably still banged up from running into the wall and hit a ball to the moon out in the field. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So
Well, the thing about Royce too is, and I had him on and I've talked to him a lot, but I say this a lot with people in the organization that they're as good a ball player as he is, he's a better person.
right.
And you see that a lot, which is really kind of cool, especially if you get a chance to know them a little bit. I want to talk just a little bit. You talked about, working out. What are a couple of the things that you're really focused on as you head towards your first spring training with the Twins?
Yeah, so I'll just little snippet. I won't give away too much detail, but I would say in my experience so far, the Twins in the offseason are much more hands-on than the Rays were. So actually, of course, with the lockout right now, I'm not talking to anybody, but leading up to that, there was a lot of communication and a lot of programs being swapped back and forth to where, they were very much involved in kind of getting me set up and doing whatever I need versus in my past experience, the off season, almost felt like a time for me to take charge on this thing. And it was very much almost like a one-sided go and develop. And I mean, that helped me during the shutdown of the 2020 season, didn't go to the training sites. So I was all training on my own, kind of got to develop my own way, which was good for me. But, there kind of runs a time in which my knowledge runs out and I can no longer kind of help myself. I need some extra eyes and I need some extra ideas and programs. So definitely working on definitely command and attack in the zone. We're trying to limit the walks because that was the bane of my existence last year. And get ahead, number one, make the other team beat you. That's the, name of the game. Don't beat yourself. And as a pitcher, unfortunately, pitching in baseball is one of those moments in sport where you're well within, beating yourself sort of thing. They don't have to swing the bat if you're not throwing strikes. So throwing strikes pretty much is number one, attacking the zone, getting ahead and commanding all these pitches as a starter. So I can work deeper into the games, have better starts and, give the team a chance to win on a consistent basis without putting too much strain on the bullpen because they're going to throw big innings down the stretch at the end of games and you don't want them having to clean up too many messes in the middle.
No, I get that. And I mean, that really seems like if you look at your numbers, that's the only thing, you will get rid of, I think, I don't know, last year it was like 5 walks per 9. If you get that down to 3.5, that's going to save you a lot of pitches too. So I definitely, I get that. So, last thing, well, kind of, it'll probably branch off a little bit, but we talked a little beforehand. You got the Central Perk poster behind you. I know you're a Friends guy. You also, during the pandemic, spent a little bit of time creating your own blog at, I think, bingeworthy.com or something like that. It's worth checking out. A couple pretty decent reviews on there that you wrote. Talk a little bit about, are you still binging shows or just not enough time anymore? I mean, the off season is a wonderful time for that.
Yeah, definitely binging some, maybe not as much as I was. Binge-worthy is something that I did at the very, onset of the pandemic. So when we got shut down during spring of 2020, I stayed down there in Florida because I I thought, oh, this will be 2 weeks and then we'll be back in spring training.
And nobody knew.
And so as that dragged on, I found myself, especially in the Florida heat, avoiding the heat, watching a lot of shows. And I'm the kind of person where, once I started to spend hours and hours and hours on something, I was like, okay, maybe we need to try to find a way to make this a little more productive and maybe work on a new skill that I don't have quite figured out. So I was like, I'm just going to kind of look into how easy it is to like make a blog review site and, let's have some fun with this. So that was really the main goal, was like have fun with it, watch some shows. Part of it was I was kind of getting to go back and see some things that I hadn't before, some series and stuff. So I haven't updated Binge Worthy in a while, kind of as life kind of got rolling again. Baseball started back up. Definitely went to the back burner, and I don't consider myself a great writer. I appreciate you saying there's some good reviews on there. But again, it was almost something where I knew like, okay, this is not my skill set, but this is a chance to figure something out. Also during the pandemic, as college went back online, I got back into college courses to go back and finish off that degree. So as that stepped up, I also had less time for binging, and that also kind of transitioned Binge Worthy to back burner. But I did finish my degree, kind of one thing that's left off the shoulders again, because, I wasn't necessarily stressing about it. I knew I could get it done, but it was just a matter of when. So now that I got that done, it's something that, I can go back to my parents' house and I have a diploma sitting there. It feels pretty good.
Absolutely. That's a big deal. No question. And having that accounting degree before you get your first MLB paycheck might help too sometime. Or you can hire the right people. But are you binging anything right now? Are you binging anything, or are there a couple that you've been your favorite? Because again, I'm a big binge TV watcher. With a lot of series. I also like documentaries. And like you, I'm like, well, what am I doing with all this? I almost feel like I need to either start a podcast or another blog or something. And where am I going to find time to do that? So anyway, what are you watching now, or what have been a couple of your favorites?
I'll usually kind of flow through genres or themes, you could say. So I mean, and some of that is dependent upon like what's popular at the time. Obviously, like with Squid Games, that was one that was worldwide huge. So kind of like once you had that, it was dystopian, kind of gory, like a kind of a dark twist to it. For a little while there, I had like a like yearning for something more. So I really like the Black Mirror series, which is all different dystopian versions of plays upon our society. How does technology over impact the way we do things? And I like those because they kind of challenge certain perspectives, or how much you really want to like lean into the technology. Because for me, it's easy to jump on technology sort of stuff, as has been in my career, and I know that some guys take a much harder stop on something like that. So it really gives you a different way of thinking about that sort of thing. But I also flow from usually like the darker, even more intense, action shows or whatever. So then I need something lighter. So for a while there, like Friends was kind of like my go-to, like put it on, not have to sit there and like lock in on everything that was happening. Lighter show with, it has a laugh track, and some people hate that, but it's just something very light that I could just throw on and almost take off, like lower the intensity meter for a while I watch something. So I mean, definitely a lot of shows out there. I'm trying to think, I'm also in the docu-series a little bit. So this off season, one of my college teammates showed me like rock climbing, which he's really into for the first time, and just like indoor rock climbing stuff, completely safe. I'm not out there, free scaling.
For any Twins officials watching.
No. So then after that, I had like an appreciation, because it was hard. I was struggling on like the easy stuff, and then he, looks like Spider-Man going up the walls. I mean, also noted, like the Marvel series is great, and I've watched all the movies, but I haven't taken a dive into like the new TV shows. So like that's something also that like I'm gonna get into at some point. It's just a matter of finding the several weeks where I know I have enough time to really get into it.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned to you, I got HBO Max this last summer because they had a documentary on Q Into the Storm, which is one of those things that I just have to watch. But then after that, I had to watch Friends, and then I started watching some true crime things, and then I, had to watch The Big Bang Theory, and then I watched Squid Games. So immediately I had to watch
Under the
Impractical
Grapefruit
Jokers.
Tree about CC Sabathia. Is that on HBO Max or where's that? That was a good one.
Uh,
I saw some of that, but those
I'll
baseball
have to look
documentaries too
that
give
up.
you a real appreciation for the game when you
What?
see like kind of those backstories.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was one on Chin Min Wong that I've watched. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and then the next day I'll just be like, okay, here's a uh, documentary on late night TV hosts, and then I watched one on Beanie Babies this weekend. Like that, what? I didn't even collect any of those. So okay, I'm gonna let you go, but I do want to say, besides TV, movies, and baseball, what else? What else does Drew Strotman enjoy doing in his life?
Um, I feel like I have smaller passions that end up taking like a few months at a time, and then I'll move on to something else. But
Sure.
so I studied. I'll say I studied language in high school. I studied Spanish for like 6 years. So
Okay.
when I first got into pro ball, I didn't take any college courses because I had the credit done. Luckily, when I got in, I was sharing a clubhouse with players from the Dominican Republic and Venezuela. I was rusty, but I was able to pick it back up pretty quick.
Well,
And then pretty soon, me looking how I look, I speak Spanish, and some of those guys are like what? Or I usually give it away if they're telling a joke and I understand some of the joke, and
right.
I laugh, and they'll kind of take a moment and be like, "Hold on a second, you understood that?" Like maybe we. So I gained an appreciation for the linguistics. So then my Spanish is pretty good. I'm constantly reviewing it like daily. I use the Duolingo app to just do a couple lessons every day.
That's awesome.
And then recently I've been working on my Japanese because I know that's kind of like probably the second most used language in baseball.
Sure.
There's Spanish,
For when the
English.
Twins signed Shohei Ohtani, right?
Mm-hmm. Or the next great talent coming over there, because there is just
Absolutely.
so much talent over there. And I know I have plenty of friends that I've played with in the last year that are now starting to sign contracts over there as well. So
Yeah.
it goes both ways. The American players go there, and Japanese players come to the States and play. Obviously, as you mentioned, Shohei and many other great players. So I like to learn on that, and hopefully be able to extend an olive branch in the clubhouse and talk to a guy one on one, even if I'm speaking in their language maybe a little broken, but
Right.
at least
I think
show
they'd
a little bit of
appreciate that.
effort. I almost want to get to know them without working directly through a translator, which isn't the worst thing. It's great to have those, but I think it says something.
It is, absolutely. All right, I'm going to let you go and say thank you. I just want to give you one opportunity. Are there certain people in your life that kind of have helped you get to this point where right now you've spent a full season in AAA,
Mm-hmm.
you've been traded for a potential Hall of Fame great, you're in a new organization, but who are some of those people that have helped you get to that point, just right on the verge of reaching your dream, the big
Mm-hmm.
leagues?
Well, I'll say first and foremost, like my family is provided never-ending support. There was never a question of, maybe you shouldn't try this baseball thing and go do
Right.
something more practical. So I mean, they've always supported and will come out to visit, and came out to St. Paul a couple times. I have a girlfriend too that came out there and visited me several times in St. Paul, especially stepping into a clubhouse where I don't know a lot of guys. You don't have a lot of friends that you get used to go hanging out with after the game. So especially when you step into a new clubhouse, it frankly is like a little lonely at first. And I always saw that being within the Rays organizations when new guys came over. It almost felt like why are these guys not part of the group? Like why are they? It's just because you don't know how to mesh into that sort of system. So
Right.
They were consistent through the whole process. Obviously, it was family and friends, and then obviously I've learned so much from everybody, all my teammates and coaches with the Rays, and I already have learned so much from like teammates and coaches that I've had with the Twins in only half of a season. So I mean, I'm looking forward to continuing to work with all those people and make strides personally and for the team. So I mean, I'm just excited. You know, everybody between family, you know, people in my agency that I've been working through the whole process and making sure I'm covered and doing okay. And then of course, like any fans that I've had, especially when I first got traded, I had, you know, fans commenting on pictures like "Welcome to the Twins," you know, can't wait to see you there. And I that was new to me. Like you know, having fans like I guess really address you individually within the organization really almost made you feel like part of, you know, that major league. I guess you could say spotlight.
Sure.
So I mean, Twins fans have been great. You know, I know I didn't do great last season, but I didn't have anybody, you know, reach out to me and be like, "Why the heck do we trade for you?" I mean, I'm guessing like maybe other cities, like if it was just New York, I'd have, you know,
Yeah, or just wait until you have one rough start or something when you get to the big leagues, and then
yeah,
you
maybe I
might get
should
a
have talked. Yeah,
couple. But we are Minnesota nice, so it'd just be
yeah, that's what
people
I
that are
mean.
from outside the state, probably.
Yeah,
So yeah, I just want to say thank you, and I really appreciate this. Like you said, you know, I spend so much time. You know, I've written 12 off-season handbooks on the Twins minor league system. I've been doing this for a long time, and you get so ingrained in one organization that, frankly, I mean, this is almost embarrassing to admit, but when the Twins traded Nelson Cruz, I had to look up who Joe Ryan was. I had to look up
of
who Drew
course.
Strotman was. So this has been a lot of fun for me, and I think for those that listen to it as well, to actually get to know you and know you beyond just what the box scores and the
Mm-hmm.
stat line says. So I really do appreciate your willingness to do this. Hopefully, spring training can get going on time because I look forward to getting to Fort Myers
Yeah,
and maybe even getting a chance to meet you in person if they even let us in the clubhouse. But we'll see.
yeah, I would love that.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much. That's Drew Strotman, Twins pitching prospect. Thanks to everyone for listening. Please feel free to leave some feedback. I appreciate it, everybody. And of course, we got to end with Go Twins.
Go Twins.